Okay, welcome back for part 2 of the shift cart build. You'll probably remember that where we left off last week was we'd come to a bit of a crossroads where we'd worked out a major flaw in using this engine. So that was, if we have a look at the engine, rotary valve engine, which means that here is where the carburetor is mounted. Not a problem, however, when these engines were initially designed, the engine was mounted on the left-hand side of the cart, whereas now our modern-day carts mount the engine on the right. So here's our fabricated engine mount that came with the engine, and the issue we were having is the carburetor was right here, which basically puts it right in the way of the seat. So there was a lot of head scratching that's been done over the last week. One of the simple solutions seemed to be, well, hang on, it looks like the carburetor can run here on this alternate port. Essentially, this engine was used in motorcycles as well. So I was like, you beauty, bang the carburetor there out the back, and we'll turn the cylinder to run the exhaust out the front, and we'll make that work. Unfortunately, if we have a look in here, to make that work, we actually have to get some other parts. So the rotary valve, which is in here, would then have a new mount which puts an intake manifold at a very sharp bend up to the back. Now there's a fair bit of talk about what sort of performance you're going to lose by having a sharp bend and a long intake tract like that, but the big thing for me was it's difficult to get parts for it. So we're going to try something else today. We're going to try and basically manufacture some room and see if we can still maintain keeping the carburetor in its current position. So here's where we start. Back at our engine mount, we really need to be able to get this across a little bit. So after some head scratching, I'll pull that out of the way, I went ahead and found these. Now these are usually the bottom engine mounts, so they'll usually clamp up under the frame. So we're going to have a crack at using them here in this situation by sitting them on the frame this way. And I've got one for the front as well. I've put a captive nut in there, so the regular bottom chassis clamps can go straight onto those. And then you'll notice a new hole, this hole, is actually going to run up into the original threaded hole on our mounts. So if we just look at the front one, that's how far we've managed to sneak the mount across. Let's bolt it up, get the engine in there, and see if it makes much of a difference. So after shifting the engine across, you can see the white tape here is where the intake is on the engine. We've managed to get ourselves just a smidgen of room, which hopefully we'll be able to use. So if I come around to the back, the seat's in roughly the position it needs to be. And we can see we've got a little bit of room here where we can potentially make ourselves a bit of a manifold. Idea is that the carburetor is going to end up somewhere around here, forward facing. And what are we going to use to make that? Well, in typical low budget fashion, got ourselves a tight radius, these just cast iron I think, pipe, plumbing fittings, got ourselves a tight radius 90. And an open radius 90. So I'm going to hit the shed and see what I can come up with. So I didn't take the video camera into the workshop, but here's some still photos of the process. Basically just a lot of cutting and grinding with simple tools, then port matching the two sections of plumbing pipe to each other so it flows as smooth as possible. seemed to work okay and should be fine for the application. So here's what about 2 hours with an angle grinder and a Bunnings gasless MIG welder will get you. I've gone with a tight radius bend right off the flange, cut the flange out from a bit of angle iron, and then the more open radius bend afterwards. Gone inside, I don't know if you can see, but gone inside with the Dremel, opened that up, port matched it, so where the two pieces join is actually a really good transition. And it seems to be stuck together, which for a bit of old galvanised water pipe I guess is pretty good. So we'll bang this one on and then we'll have a look at how it fits compared to the seat and if it's going to be a viable option. Well, there it is. As you can see, we're going to be well inside the line of our seat now, which is good. We've got our card fairly flat, so that'll work with the float bowl. And you can see the angle coming out. So the tight radius bend goes up, and then the more open radius bend goes forwards. Now, there's obviously the fact that it's not ideal to have bends in your intake manifold. However, if we were going to run it on the way that Rotax decided was to go for motorcycles, there's a super tight bend, probably even tighter radius than this, right off of the inlet valve, rotary valve, to come back here, and the inlet tract is actually probably just slightly longer on the Rotax way as well. So it's not too bad, it's a pretty good compromise, and I think for about, I don't know, $10 in plumbing fittings, it's come up pretty good and should be a good thing. From here, I think we'll chuck a chain on, chain and a sprocket, and we'll see how well that lines up and decide if we're happy with where the engine is. So we've got a chain on it now. Bag of spares that came with it had this pitch chain and sprockets, which I presume are a regular shifter cart. I don't know what the pitch is called, but it seems to fit up well. It's quite tight, and we've got the engine right back at the moment, so we'll need to look at some longer chains to move the engine forward. But if we pull the plug, should be able to hear it turn over. So to my books, that is a mounted engine with a carburetor that should potentially do what it's supposed to, fit up nicely. Next issue is going to be the exhaust. I've got a couple of options of exhaust. If I come down here in the bottom of the cart stand, there's a factory Rotax Max. This one is an old X30. So let's grab this out for a moment. I just like these because they're a bit lighter, a bit smaller, hopefully a bit easier to mount. If we look at roughly where the mounting will be, hopefully should be able to mount up just using the regular bracket that we would use on any X30. So coming off the bearing carrier here into the cradle. I'll see if I can hunt one of those down from my spares pile. And I think next week's work is going to be trying to make this fit. Like everything else on this cart, it's going to need some buggerising around, I suppose you'd call it. This is the stock X30 old style exhaust manifold. So obviously the port size there is different. Got a rectangle port, round port. So I'm going to have to make myself an exhaust manifold, but looking to go as close to this length as possible. If I have to go a little longer, for example about there, we can hopefully just make up for it by running slightly less exhaust flex to get the length down to something useful. No idea what that length is, because obviously I haven't ran this engine and I don't think we even have its stock exhaust here, but that's where we're going from here. So there you have it, guys. Pretty busy week tinkering at night on the cart. We've gone from an engine that definitely wasn't going to fit to an engine that somewhat does fit, all with the help of some really cheap parts that probably were never meant to be on go-karts. From here we're going to do the exhaust, electrics, get this up to the stage where hopefully we can test fire it in the next episode or two, then finish off the cart and get it out on track and see how it goes. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Please remember, like and subscribe if you want to see more of this cart or more of any of the other projects that we're working on here from the guys at No Idea. So thank you very much.